Well, I ran into Sue and Eileen and Bill and Dawn the other day. I mean, you can be talking about almost anybody. New research is laying out a very convincing argument that Martha is really Mary Magdalene, which is another sermon for another time. Anyway, Martha was very busy. Perispao. She was overoccupied. She was driven away mentally. Meanwhile, Mary was absorbed in listening to Jesus' teachings. Martha blew up. The Greek words are stronger than what we get to hear in the English. It's like, don't you care that Mary has abandoned me? Don't you care that she has left me all alone to serve? And Jesus replies, Martha, Martha, you are troubled with cares and all stirred up. Mary has chosen the central thing, which can never be taken away from her. Now, I don't know about you, but that often makes my blood boil, because that's very nice for Mary to sit and listen, but who's going to make the coffee? Do you think dinner is just going to march onto the table by itself? So as you listen, I want you to really question, reflect on, what's going on with Martha? What's going on with Mary? For that matter, what's going on with Jesus? Listen, Leanne.
We'll start with Exodus. You shall not oppress a stranger. You know the heart of a stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. And then on to Mary and Martha in Luke. Now, as they went on their way, Jesus entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him. She had a sister named Mary who sat at Jesus' feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her task. So she came to him and asked, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work myself? Tell her then to help me. But the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things, but few things are needed, indeed, only one. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her. The word of God for all the people.
I might be showing my age here. Do any of you remember the great ballet dancer Mikhail Baryshnikov? He defected from the Soviet Union to Canada, and then he immigrated to the United States. And he once said, I left a country that built walls to come to a place without them. America welcomed me, an immigrant, and that welcome has made my life possible. America welcomed me, an immigrant, and that welcome has made my life possible. Of course, he said that in 1986. It would be interesting to hear how he phrases that today. We are a part of a denomination, the United Church of Christ, that prides itself on hospitality, on opening doors rather than building walls. Way back in the day, I want to say about, 15, 16 years ago, there was an advertisement called The Bouncer. And we had enough money for it to air in the middle of the night on smaller TV stations, but it was controversial, so a lot of people wound up getting to see it. It showed a big classic, downtown brick stone church and a velvet rope in front with a bouncer. And he'd let in the attractive, white, seemingly straight people, say, yes, in, and to all the others he'd say, nope, 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 nope. And then it said, the United Church of Christ, something about all are welcome. It was a wonderful ad. Hospitality is encoded in the DNA of the United Church of Christ. We have a rich heritage of opening doors. We opened the doors of ordained ministry to African Americans in 1785, well before other mainline denominations. We ordained Antoinette Brown Blackwell in 1853, over 100 years before Presbyterians and Methodists would think about ordaining women. Our predecessors learned the language of the African men and women imprisoned following the rebellion on the slave ship Amistad. and they help them secure their freedom. When Harriet Beecher Stowe was inspired during communion to write the novel Uncle Tom's Cabin, she added impetus to the movement that tore down the walls of slavery in our nation. And it was Jackie Robinson, a devoted United Church of Christ member, although the Methodists try to claim him and they're wrong. It was Jackie Robinson who broke through the walls that kept African Americans out of Major League Baseball. We ordained an openly gay minister in 1974. Our General Synod voted for marriage equality in 2005. And that was just 1 year after our church voted to join the ranks of open and affirming churches, meaning that we welcome and affirm everyone, regardless of sexual or gender orientation, and that means full inclusion in the life and leadership of the church, which has been borne out over the years. And when we gather for communion, we take great pains to include everyone who wants to be included, not to be politically correct, not to be woke, but we do it because that's what we understand Jesus to have done. So we serve grape juice, because there are surely people with alcohol issues in our midst. We all share gluten-free bread. Children are fully welcome. We keep an open table. That's central to us. Amistad, Brown-Blackwell, Stowe, Robinson, do those names sound familiar? I hope they sound familiar because we named our meeting rooms after them, after the big remodel we did. And when we remodeled, our aim was to create a welcoming space for those who would come through our doors. At our peak, just before the pandemic shut down, we had 8 12-step groups, 4 Girl Scout groups, Ride Connections, women from the Mary Mack House. Recently, the Oregon Rep Singers summer program for children took place at our church. And of course, we're the home to the preschool kindergarten co-op. That's a lot of building use for a church that doesn't have a live-in custodian monitoring movement in and out. And we open our doors not because it's the cool thing to do. We open our doors because it's a biblical and theological imperative. We can't call ourselves Christian and ignore for our convenience the biblical exhortations to care for the sojourner, the traveler, the person who is not or not yet one of us. Back in, was it 2018 or 2019, Marilyn Grandel, are you here? Barb, which year was it? We voted to become an immigrant, welcoming, and sanctuary church. And that was no small vote that we took to take legal risks, if need be, to house somebody who was perhaps an illegal immigrant or refugee. Our mission committee is known throughout the Central Pacific Conference for showing up, for their steadfast witness, and they're showing up consistently at rallies and at vigils. Other ministers say, how did you get them so involved? And I said, well, I just stood back. I just stood back. They live out the mandate. You shall not oppress a stranger. You know the heart of a stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. We were all of us, or our ancestors, unless you are Native American, we were all of us strangers in the land of America. My great-great-grandfather, that's not very far back, he swam to shore from a sinking boat. Many of us were once strangers in Oregon. I remember moving here in August and thinking, don't these people water their lawns? What's the matter with them? And now I'm one of those Oregonians who never waters my lawn. It's a point of pride. Every one of us was once a stranger here in this church. Even, I would guess, our lone remaining charter member. Do you remember the first time you came to church? I do. See? We were all once strangers here in this church. Now, we'd like to think we were welcomed with open arms, but I know that some of you had to scale some walls, yes? Or I'm guessing some of you did. Actually, I'm thinking some of you, this might be your first time here. That's kind of cool. Welcome. We open our doors and we open our arms because, again, it is a theological and biblical imperative, and that goes for all of us, not just the Newcomer Committee. And what does that mean? August is a good time to talk about this because there will be more people showing up, curious about us as they are looking to settle into a spiritual home for the fall. One thing it means is that we talk to newcomers, all of us. I know it's hard. I know it's hard. And I think I've identified the 4 main reasons why it's difficult to talk to newcomers. The first one is we tend to be anxious about us. Why? Because we're worried we will welcome a member of 20 years. How many of us have done that? Yeah, see? It's a big club. It happens. Here's a clue. Instead of saying good to meet you, try saying good to see you. Good to see you. And while we're at it, when you see someone who hasn't been here for a while, I know it's so tempting to want to be funny and say, it's about time you showed up. I thought you'd been raptured. Resist the temptation. Resist, resist. And what do you say instead? Good to see you. Again, ready? Good to see you. See, it's not so hard. Number 2, we're also worried we won't get to spend time with our friends who we only see once a week. And let's face it, many of us, most of us, are introverts, are we not? So I have come up with a list of questions that I personally use to cycle through with newcomers. I'm giving away my secrets. And still have time to chat with people I know I need to chat with. 3 questions. What brought you here today? Is that so hard? What brought you here today? So good to see you. What brought you here today? Tell me a little about yourself. Now, you're not asking for the full encyclopedic biography. Tell me a little about yourself. Repeat, everyone, tell me a little about yourself. Can I answer any quick questions about the church? Answer any quick questions about the church. Then, after you've had this brief-ish conversation, you can connect them with someone else. You don't want to hog them. So you say, oh, you're from Wisconsin. You must meet Mary Slayton. You must. Oh, look, here's Jeff Kazel. Jeff, are you from Wisconsin? Chicago. Oh, I thought as I said that, oh, grave error. You're a Bears fan, you find out. Here's Jeff Kazel. You like to quilt. Oh, look, you must talk to Pat Sandberg, Teresa Hall. Oh, here's Chris Baker. Oh, I like your Sensible Gun Laws Now t-shirt. Let me introduce you to someone from the mission committee. And so the conversations continue. The point of it really is not exactly to get out of the conversation, but I know you have other people to talk with, and you don't want to hog our guests. So you thoughtfully introduce them to other people with whom they might have something in common. And then you get to say, I'm so glad we met. I hope to see you again. That's it. It's not all that complicated. The third reason, my favorite, is you may be bad with names. Anybody else bad with names? Yes. When I was an associate minister up at the Bellevue United Church of Christ with like 450 members, the first day I was there, the first Sunday I was there, the senior pastor introduced me to everybody and then expected me to know them. And I can still remember the feeling of the little spring in my head that went boing! And from that point on, I couldn't remember a name. Years ago, in my last church, I famously forgot the name of the secretary I'd worked with for 8 years. And she'd been moderator twice. It's a terrible handicap. It makes us look, those of us who have trouble with names, it makes us look like we don't care. And you know that I care. I just can't remember names. So let's make a pact right now to help each other out. If you're in one of those situations where somebody is trying to introduce people and it obviously looks like they've forgotten your name and they get that look of panic, stick out your hand and say, hi, I'm, and give your name. You can remember your name, right? that's what you need to do. It is such a grace-filled thing to do. And the final thing is that we're busy. We're busy. We have a lot of things on our plate, and many of us, when we come to church, have a lot of things on our plate, and we're distracted and overloaded with much serving, like Martha. One Sunday, I visited the church down the road where I had been ordained. I had a Sunday off. And I was excited to go see what was going on, see old friends. They were completely consumed with meetings after church. They were completely consumed with meetings before church. Not one person said hello to me. In fact, I found myself greeting newcomers for them and talking up the church and getting literature out. Afterward, not only was there no one to talk to because they were at their meetings, I didn't know where the coffee was. I finally found it, and you guessed it, it was all gone. Yesterday, I was digging into the text from Luke and doing some word study translations. I saw something I had never seen before in this Mary and Martha story, and honestly, it made my stomach turn. The phrase that says, Martha was distracted with much serving. What do you think of when you think of that? Cell phones? Something with dishes? Washing dishes? Cooking, preparing food. That's what I have always thought of. Martha was distracted with much serving. Finally, for the first time in my life that I can remember, I looked up the word serving. The word serving is diakonos, which is the root for deacon. Deacons in the church are the ones charged with compassionate serving and member care. Martha wasn't necessarily distracted with cooking. Martha was possibly distracted with her many church chores. We've all seen it happen. It certainly happened for me. So involved in service in church that we lose sight of what's central. Mary had in sight what was central. Listening to the teachings of Jesus. But it's so easy to shift from Mary mode to Martha mode, isn't it? And all of you who are holding a church office or who are worried about how are we going to find more people to make coffee are going, yes, but how do we make this all happen? And that's the Mary-Martha balancing act we have to live within. One of the ways that we can attend to hospitality while we're consumed with those other things is just to keep in mind our call to hospitality and say, hey, I'm on my way to a meeting. I can be a few minutes late. Or I'm on my way to the adult education. Oh, it's about learning to see God, or what does God look like? Would you like to go? I can show you the way. Or, oh, you're from Wisconsin. Let me introduce you to Jeff Kazel, who's not from Wisconsin, but Chicago, that's close enough. Hospitality involves welcoming visitors, yes. It also means welcoming their whole selves, receiving their ideas into the life of the church. It means treating each other with as much respect throughout the life of the church as we treat each other, or we try to treat each other at the front door. Hospitality is a holy habit. What we practice here, we can take with us out there, attempting to reach across the chasms and help bring healing to our extended families and our nation. And in so doing, help bring healing to ourselves. It turns out, the more we practice hospitality, you'll find actually we need the stranger too. We need the newcomer, the immigrant, the other, because that person has the potential for troubling our complacencies, breaking open our prejudices, expanding our horizons. We may need the stranger more than the stranger needs us. And finally, we need the stranger because that person can take us beyond our illusion of separation into the unity of the mind of God. Now we're going to get woo-woo for a minute. We're taught from childhood to draw distractions between people. Boy, girl, young, old, popular, not popular, urban, rural, rich, poor, liberal, conservative, Yankee, Dodger, Beaver, Duck. We're taught this dualistic thinking in order to make sense of our world, but we get stuck in the ruts of duality, and the ruts grow into those chasms that we see in our lives today. One way across that chasm is what the Hindu Vedas call Advaita, or non-dual consciousness. The English monk Bede Griffiths spent years in India, and he saw it was there in Christianity all along. He said, we become more ourselves as we enter more deeply into relationship with others. We do not lose ourselves, but what we lose is our sense of separation, and we lose our sense of division, and we enter into non-dual consciousness. I think Jesus recognized it when he said, when you welcomed a stranger, you welcomed me. Whatever you did for the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you did for me. Non-dual consciousness is that recognition that we are all one, and we're all absorbed into a greater whole, a greater consciousness, what theologian Friedrich Schleiermacher called the God consciousness. We're all a part of that. You've been there, I bet, that moment when the separation drops away, just for a moment, and you're absorbed in the all, and all is one. It's right there on our UCC logo. If you look on the cover of the hymn books, you'll see the logo. And it contains the rich, chewy center of Jesus' final prayer with his disciples. I don't pray for these only, but also for those who are to believe in me through their word, that they may all be one, even as you, God, are in me and I in you, that they may also be in us. Prayer can take us there. Music can take us there. Fresh powder on Mount Hood can take us there. Love can take us there. Seeing into the other can take us there. And being seen by the other can take us there. We need the stranger as much as the stranger needs us. Remember how it was for you. Remember the essential thing that Mary found by listening at Jesus' feet. You might meet your new best friend. You might, as the book of Hebrews says, meet an angel unaware. That might be the same thing. As an old Celtic rune says, I met a stranger yesterday. I put food in the eating place, drink in the drinking place, music in the listening place. And in the name of the triune, the stranger blessed myself and my house, my cattle and my loved ones. And the lark sang in his song, oft, oft, oft goes Christ in the stranger's guise. Oft goes Christ in the stranger's guise.